Welcome, everyone. I'm Erica Malinowski, no W and no relation, co-president of Soma Action, and also interviewing with me will be Allison Posner, our other co-president. Soma Action is a grassroots organization dedicated to driving progressive change. And as part of that, we put out voter guides for every election, interviewing and evaluating candidates about their support for the issues our committees are working on. Please note that questions are restricted to areas where our committees are active, so there are some important issues we don't cover. We hope that voters will seek out candidates and learn more. Today, we're joined by Brendan Gill, a candidate for New Jersey's 11th Congressional District. Brendan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Could you please introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for Congress?
That's great. Well, first of all, thank you to Soma Action. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me and giving me this platform to talk about my candidacy. My name is Brendan Gill. I'm in Essex County, currently an Essex County Commissioner. Very briefly, born and raised in the township of Montclair, actually launched my campaign for Congress in front of my parents' home, where they still live in Montclair. My dad is a retired public school teacher in Montclair, 53 years. I'm the son of a union household. Grew up, five of us, one bathroom, shared a bedroom, a bunk bed with my brother, longer than I would like to remember, but had access to a quality public education that allowed me to get to college, and then also allowed me to go build a career and work on things that I loved. That career included a commitment to public service. I was able to work on the staffs of the late Congressman Bill Pascrell, the late Senator Frank Lautenberg, Congressman Steve Rothman, and for a brief period of time, Senator Cory Booker. It led also to opportunities for me to run and work for people that worked on issues that I cared about, to fight for working people each and every day, both in what those people did and what their campaigns represented. The reason that I'm running is that I was given quite a few opportunities, both from the community that I was born and raised in this area, that allowed me now to have a family, that allowed me now to be planted still in Montclair with a 16 and a 13-year-old. And when I look at what's going on in our country right now, both from the threats that are coming on our democracy out of Washington, and also just on a range of issues in terms of access to education, what's going on with our infrastructure, economic development, a range of issues which I know we'll touch on during the course of this interview. I'm concerned not only for my kids and my family, but for all of us, that those same teams about those same opportunities, so to speak, the version of the American dream that my wife and I have been able to live doesn't look like it will be available. It's slipping away. And I'm running to fight back, to push back, to try to protect that. I think I have the skill set to do that based on my public experience, based on my work in these communities that make up the New Jersey 11th Congressional District, and based on my passion to want to serve the people that I've had the honor to represent at the county level.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass it over to Allison to start with our first set of questions.
Okay, thank you. You are running to be one of 435 voting members of one House of Congress. That's power, but it is limited. Realistically, what will you have the power to do as a U.S. representative, and what won't you have the power to do?
Well, thank you, Allison. I think the fact that I've had past federal experience, I think that there's a lot of power within these offices. Almost to a certain extent, I'm going to say unlimited, based on where you want to spend your time if you have the opportunity to be in this office, and how you want to be able to spend this time. I think right now, the person that fills this seat has to be able to do two things at the same time. And I think that's the strength of my own candidacy in this race. We have to be able to stand up to Donald Trump, to the authoritarian leadership that's coming out of Washington, to the MAGA Republicans, and be a part of the broader coalition that is fighting each and every day to that existential threat that is attacking our basic democratic norms. And we have to be able to do that as a member of Congress through a variety of tools: speaking out, organizing, which I have a long history of doing, and being a leader in that space. And at the same time, we have to be able to deliver on the quality of life and affordability issues that span this district. We need someone in this seat who understands what the infrastructure needs are in these communities. We need someone who understands the problems of the people that you're seeking and challenges to represent. So a congressional office can do a variety of things on those issues when we're talking about the cost of healthcare, when we're talking about funding early childhood education, when we're talking about issues like the Gateway Tunnel, when we're talking about tax fairness and equity, which relates directly to the affordability issue here in the region that we have. So the office that you have as a member of Congress can do a lot of things on those issues. You can do things legislatively. You can do things by using the platform of your office to push discussions which lead to policy outcomes. You can make sure that you're delivering real in terms of dollars and cents for your district. So the person that's in this seat, in my opinion, and I had the honor to work for Bill Pascrell. He represented South Orange for over 15 years. I think actually close to 20, two decades. I did not work for him all during that time. But if you were to talk about the type of leader that I would want to be viewed as, the type of member of Congress, that was a person whose feet were firmly planted on the ground in terms of where he was, in terms of his relationships within the communities that he was seeking to represent, and he was able to use the office to bring back things into communities like South Orange and Maplewood. And I should have put it's Soma. I got to make South Orange and Maplewood, right? For this purposes. But we have to have people that understand both of those things at the same time and who can deliver on those things. So, I'm a person who has a track record of being able to do that.
What skills does a congressperson need to be effective, and how have you demonstrated those skills?
So I think there's a few things that you need to do to be an effective member of Congress. First, you need to be a coalition builder. You need to build relationships in the communities that you're representing. Your first obligation, I believe, as a member of Congress is to understand who you are seeking to represent and to make sure that you are able to build and maintain relationships with both community leaders, nonprofit leaders, organizations like Soma Action, so you can be a responsible legislator to what they're telling you you need to do. And I have a track record, again, of doing that. I have had leadership positions both in congressional offices as the leader of one of the most progressive organizations in this state, the Montclair Democratic Party, which shows that I build coalitions across various constituencies to deliver results on the issues that we're talking about. And I think that's an important skill that you need to have in order to do this job effectively. One of the advantages to my candidacy is that since I am born and raised here and I've spent my life here, I'm not building these relationships for the first time. I'm not walking into these communities needing to be educated from square one about what may matter. And I think that's important because the person that fills this seat, whoever comes out of this primary. And of course, I will say right here, whoever wins this primary will have my full throttle support on day one to make sure we win the general election. I hope that it's me, but if it's not, that we will make sure to be behind that person 100% as we move towards the April general election. But that person's not going to have a lot of time for on-the-job training. They're going to need to be able to hit the ground running, to be able to deliver for the district, to be able to fight for the issues that I just outlined. And that skill itself, in terms of your knowledge, coalition building, leadership, your knowledge of federal issues, your knowledge of state issues, the fact that you're not calling leaders for the first time, and you've already worked with them in the past, I think is a really important to whoever fills the seat going forward. And I think that's what I bring to the table for this position.
Often in politics, donors, political bosses, and other people with power will try to persuade you to prioritize their interests over those of your constituents. This could be by making you dependent on their money, having control over your career, or simply building relationships that make it hard to say no to your friends.
Mm-hmm.
What have you done, or will you do, to keep yourself free of these entanglements and protect against them unduly impacting your judgment?
And again, I would ask, I'll start with what I've done. I've taken on some of the most powerful political interests in this state in my own professional career. When I worked for Governor Murphy early on, Governor Murphy was not the choice of powerful political interests in this state. He was the third candidate, fourth candidate in that race. And I know what it is to navigate those interests and to push back and fight back through the skill set that we just talked about early on. Secondly, on the Board of County Commissioners, I've led many fights that have been against my own party. I was the leader on getting the county of Essex out of the ICE contract many years back, before it became what I'm going to say fashionable to talk about that issue. That was an Obama-Biden era policy that meant over $50+ million of money to the county of Essex to house nonviolent immigration detainees for status. And I thought the contract was wrong. And I took on members of my own party and led that fight to get out of that contract. And I'm very proud to say, with lots of pressure all over the place being applied not to do that, but ultimately what always has been my guiding light is to do what is in the best interest of the people that I've been given the privilege and honor to represent. And it's pretty much that simple. You do the right thing when you have the opportunity to do it. And I think when you will look at my track record on many issues, you will see that I'm a person that time and time again does do that. Secondly, I started in public service as a volunteer, as an activist, as a person who got involved through working in his local Democratic organization and working through other nonprofit and advocacy organizations. That's a lot about who I am. I come from that background. Like, I'm proud to lead one of the most vibrant volunteer-based organizations in the state of New Jersey that has done a tremendous amount of work on helping to address, kind of, Allison, those issues that you just asked me about. So whether it's my work with the Montclair Democratic Party, whether it's been my work that I've shown people on what I do when issues are brought to me as an Essex County Commissioner, or whether it's the work that I've done to support and or work for some of the best public servants that I think the state of New Jersey has ever seen, I would hope that those would all be examples of how I would react and navigate if I was honored to have, to win this primary and represent the 11th Congressional District.
Thank you. No one is perfect, but we are looking for leaders who create a culture that holds themselves and those around them to high standards of responsible and ethical public service. For any leadership position you've held, could you think back to times when you realized, there's a risk here that me or my staff might be tempted to abuse power or behave unethically? What measures did you put in place to prevent that from happening? Or if someone did slip up, what did you do to correct it as quickly as possible and make sure it didn't happen again?
I deeply appreciate this question. So first of all, absolutely. Like, I make mistakes every day. And one of the reasons that I hope that I've been able to prove is that I learn from those mistakes and I try to address them to both grow as a person, to grow as a community leader, and to do the best that I can for the people that have entrusted me with any type of leadership role. As I've said, I've been entrusted to have leadership roles in volunteer capacities at the local level. I've had leadership roles over large-scale campaigns. I've had leadership roles over state government offices. I was a state director for a United States Senator for 7 years. I ran 2 congressional offices. So I've had extensive experience over the 25-year history of my public service career in management and managing people and in setting up processes, hopefully to create environments that people feel comfortable to work in. And what I can tell you is that every single time that I had that opportunity, I did the best that I could to bring in because I'm not always an expert in those areas, but to bring in both individuals, whether that be the best law firms in the country, whether that be the best HR professionals in the country, whether that be people with expertise to make sure that we always set up processes for people to feel comfortable, for people to have a work environment that they could be proud of, and for people to know that there was always somewhere to go if they had something that they thought to be addressed. And throughout my career, I think that when you start there, and by the way, sometimes that evolves. I can tell you that a political campaign when I first started in 1996 is not a political campaign in 2025. I'm just going to use as an example, like the way that I was personally treated as a staffer on those campaigns early on. And I don't say this to indict any particular individual or anybody that I worked for, but some of the accepted practices that existed at that time were out of bounds then, but they were accepted and would not be accepted in any way right now. And I think that's a good thing. The evolution of that is what, to me, is most important. So, you do the best you can at that time with the tools and resources that you have available to you, and then you move from there. And if you learn later on that there's something that you should have done or could have done, you make sure to either advocate to make that happen in the future, or you reflect and then utilize that for whatever that next opportunity is.
I'm going to pass it back to Erica now.
So our next set of questions are some big picture questions. And first, our assumption is that we are in a time of attempted authoritarian takeover. Instead of politics as usual, we need to draw on the much deeper set of strategies that nonviolent civil resistance movements around the globe have used to reclaim their government when a ruler tries to insist that they get to do whatever they want with all the power and money. First off, do you agree with this assessment? And if so, what do you think needs to happen to get us to a place where we have a healthy and functional democratic government?
So I do agree with that assessment. I think the key that we need right now is ground level organizing. I think that when I say that, what does that mean? It means leading movements like I have led through my role in the Montclair Democratic Party, putting together 2 or 3 of the largest No Kings rallies in the state, across the state, which were used as platforms for people to organize and to engage in our democracy, whether that be through participating to vote, getting involved in a political campaign, or having a platform to express how they were feeling about what was going on, and then being able to do something about it. So those just aren't performative acts when you do an event or you organize an event like that. That's an event with the long-term goal of engaging people. So because the more engagement that we have, the more coalition building, I call it coalition building, but the more outreach in that space, I think ultimately helps us to get to where collectively we all want to go, which is the restoration of our democracy, and to fight back against the authoritarian leader that is Donald Trump. Just the year before that, volunteer-based activity. The Montclair, and I'm using the Montclair Dems as just like as a kind of an example of like what I would do and how I've done it. Like, we sent the most volunteers, for better or for worse, into the state of Pennsylvania. 1,500 volunteers a week, 30 buses almost, collectively over a 7-week period of time. And we did that again, with the same type of idea. This is a form of this, what I would call civil disobedience and organizing that we need. The third thing, and I'm not going to say that that I have all the answers on this particular question, but we need to have a balance right now in how we push back that, again, respects the rule of law that we are saying that we ultimately support, right? That respects these democratic norms and does not do it in a way that's being done on the other side, which just says, forget it. I don't care what the Constitution says. I'm just going to do whatever I want, right? Like, that's the balance that we're trying to find, I think, collectively, those of us who are like-minded in this space, is how do we organize, participate in civil disobedience in a way that protects what we're ultimately fighting for and gets us to that goal. And that could be a series of things. I don't want to say that I have like there's one silver bullet in doing that. But I would tell you that I've been an activist and an organizer on the ground, so I'm ready for that, right? And when people and I apologize for the length of this answer, but when people like get really overwhelmed, and they would come to these No Kings rallies, or they would come to an event, and they would say like, "What are we gonna do?" Like I can't take it, right? And I would start with the basic thing. I'm like, vote, right? Vote. Let's start there, right? Let's take out your phone, right? Let's take out your phone right now. How many people in that phone book that you have right now did you know who cast a vote? Can you tell me? Can you tell me right now? Because if you can't, like, you don't have to solve the right, think globally, act locally. Like, that's how we push back. Like, that's how we move this. And we just saw that in the last election, right? In the gubernatorial election, right? Turnout is a big piece of getting us back on track, because I believe this firmly. There are more people that agree with us than agree with them. And I believe that. I haven't given up hope on that. I don't care what the data or anything else says. And when we turn out people to participate civically, when we do things like Soma Action is doing, which is ultimately at its core, in my opinion, to engage on issues, to bring people into the process through issue-based work that they care about, we get better policy outcomes. We get better policy outcomes from our elected officials. We get better policy outcomes from our leaders, and that's part of the entire process. So yes, I'm sign me up, for that, and yes, on anyone who has good ideas how we do both of those things at the same time.
So you've largely answered a follow-up question, which is what have you already done to promote having a functioning democracy? But I want to lean a little bit more into the other piece of what would your role as a representative be?
I think my role as a representative would be to use the office itself as a tool and resource and platform for people who wanted to participate in that type of activity. Of course, within the confines of there's the political and government side, right? So a government office cannot be doing purely partisan, of course, work. We know that that's ethically wrong, and we would not be doing that. But a congressional office can participate in the community debate around the issues that exist within the district. And that's the role of that office. That's really important. I'll give you a very granular example of that and how I think that's supposed to work. When I first worked for one of the first assignments that I had as a very young staffer, a lot longer than I'd like to remember, but as a very young staffer for Bill Pascrell, was to convene an advisory committee meeting of all of the public safety officials in the district, fire and police, brought them together for a meeting. We had an outreach meeting, and the thing that came out of that meeting on the fire side was that there was no comparable grant program that existed for the fire service like the COPS program at the time that existed for police officers. So meaning that there was no federal grant program for equipment, for training, for behavioral services. And that was identified as an issue by the leadership, right, within people who within our district. Well, we went to work through our office over a period of time to fix that and to correct it. And the congressman, through his work legislatively, through our outreach on the ground, was able to create the Fire Services Act, which to now this day is the largest grant program right now, 2025. This was in 1998, 2025, the largest grant program that the federal government has that funds equipment, training, behavioral services. It's called the Services Act now. It's changed the name. It's a new acronym. It's the Fire Services Grant that did not exist. So that's an example to me, again, just one very small example of what you utilize these offices to do. The second thing that we did is we had standing advisory committees in those offices, and I would have the same thing as a member of Congress, not just one and done meetings, like across all of the issues that affect the district. These would be committees that would be made up of leaders, elected officials, community leaders, and they would have a direct access to hopefully to my office. They would have direct access to me. I think I built a career as an accessible legislator, as a responsible legislator, and they would have the ability to meet not just once with me, but to meet quarterly over the course of the year, 4 to 6 times, to draw up and to help shape the agenda that we would be working on. So it's not top down. It's not me just saying, well, hey, this is what I care about, and this is what I'd like to do in Congress, and this is what I think we should be doing. Like, no, it's like it should be coming from the people that make up the district, and I should be responding to that as their representative. So those would be like two specific things that I would do and have done. And thank you. I think I touched on in the past answer about kind of what I think I've done in my own career to try to advance that very idea.
One of the reasons we think our country is so vulnerable to authoritarianism right now is that we've spent decades concentrating wealth in the hands of a few, while ordinary people become less and less able to meet their basic needs. And while you don't have the power to single-handedly change that, what do you think we should be working toward in terms of ensuring that everyone can meet their basic needs and wealth isn't too concentrated?
So, first of all, large corporations are not paying their fair share. They're paying lower tax rates than many of the small businesses that make up this district. So we have to work on that issue. Too many businesses that drive the economy, and I can speak to this. Like, I'm a small business owner. I run a service-oriented business in a service-oriented economy right now. I employ 6 people from within my community. I pay taxes, right? I have space. I have an office, and I can tell you right now that not just for my business, but for businesses like mine, there are almost no programs, right? We think about either how do we help really, really large companies, and that's okay. Like a lot of stuff for them, or maybe like really, really down here. And then where most of these businesses live, most of the small businesses that drive the economy of this region, there's almost no programs are thought about how we help them. And I have a lot of ideas and thoughts on how maybe we can do that, and would be excited to do that. Legislatively, I would want to be a part of any movement that's going to make these large businesses pay their fair share, because it's directly related to the affordability issue that we're dealing with on the ground here in the state of New Jersey. The second thing is we have to deal with the cost of healthcare. So restoring provisions of the ACA is critically important. Opposing any types of caps on Medicaid funding and federal funding, working with our state partners, like working with Governor Sherrill to work on how we may respond in our state legislative delegation on how we may respond to those cuts, working with any type of bipartisan coalition that's going to allow us to still have access to medical care would be important to me. But I think that issue of just, I'm going to say more broadly, the Affordable Care Act, affordable health care, the cost of prescription drugs, that's all wrapped up right into the issues that people are facing every single day. The third thing that I would want to spend some time on right now is that I'm looking for my phone, because like we have 7 companies, right, that make up the S&P 500. Those 7 companies control everything that you read, see, and consume on these devices. And I can tell you, as a father of a 16 and a 13-year-old, the amount of influence, right, is off the charts, right, of what that means both to younger people, including us, right, all of us, right, we are tethered to these devices. And right now, we don't have a policy and or people, in my opinion, who are doing enough. I know Governor Sherrill worked on this issue in terms of the child privacy piece, but like we need to be doing more about putting guardrails in place, both to fight against the antitrust nature of what's going on with those companies, right? Just as a general matter, and also the guardrails that need to be put in place based on the control that those companies now have over all elements and aspects of our life. Whether you're talking about economy, delivery of healthcare, access to education, infrastructure development, all those things are directly related. And that's an area I'd want to spend some time on for sure. That would, I think, address the issue, Erica, that you started this question with in the beginning.
Throughout U.S. history, one of the most potent weapons deployed to stop efforts to broadly distribute wealth has been stoking racism. Historically, that includes dividing and conquering rebellions against plantation owners, breaking union attempts to challenge factory owners, persuading municipalities to destroy public goods like pools rather than share them, and persuading ordinary people to cut their own healthcare and social safety nets as long as it means those people don't get any. What will you or your allies do to counter this dynamic when it gets deployed to block the goals you just talked about?
Well, first of all, I think there's a ton of things we can do to restore and protect labor rights. Again, I am the son of a public school educator, but I'm also the husband of a Colombian immigrant. My kids are more Latino than anything else. I have a multiracial family. This is not an abstract issue to me. It's one that hits home for sure. So what I would be working on in terms of like just the idea that the idea of what are we going to do to protect families like mine through this office would be first and foremost to be as strong as we can be on a series of issues that deal with organized labor and the protection of workers. So whether that means working on issues of classification, whether that means strengthening the rights of of workers to be able to organize within the jobs that they have, whether that means actually making sure that even undocumented members of our community have access to those same protections. I would be on board and supporting many of those things and fighting for those things in Washington. The issue of racism is a third rail that a lot of people in New Jersey politics don't want to talk about, and we need to be talking about it. New Jersey is a highly segregated state, a highly segregated state. Grew up in a diverse community, but I also grew up in a community in the home that I was born and raised in, the home that my father bought. And I apologize for the length, but I just want to tell this story because it'll give you a sense, I think, of who I am and what I would do if I had this opportunity. When my dad moved to Montclair, he wanted to live in the community that he was working in. It took him 14 different banks in order to get the mortgage for that home. And the reason that it took him 14 various banks until he finally got to a bank who was willing to do it was that on the left of us and on the right of us were two African American families. And lender after lender told him, Mr. Gill, you don't want to live in that house. So when the 14th community bank in Montclair finally told him that, he said, yes, I do. I'm a child of the 60s and I'm going to sue your ass. And they gave him the mortgage. But when I was a young man with my younger brother and sister, we were able to walk to that community bank, and not every month, but oftentimes I joined him and he paid that mortgage to that individual in person and in full, to let that individual know who we were as a family. And also, even though he was an educator, it was a lesson that I didn't realize at the time of what he was doing, but it influenced me greatly as I got older into how I think about these issues that, Erica, that you just talked about and asked about. So that gives you a little sense of kind of personally what I would kind of how I approach it and think about it, and also what I would do if I had the opportunity to serve.
Another major barrier to progressive change has been the right wing exploiting people's fear of being harmed, particularly their fear of particularly their fear of experiencing violence in their own home or community, to scare voters away from inclusive policies. To counter this, we need to adequately address people's safety fears. What do you think works to keep people safe, and what do you see as the federal government's role in promoting that?
So, and I just want to make sure I understand the question. Do you mean keeping people safe in the context of our just overall, or in the context of election security. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I understand.
Personal safety. So fear
Personal
of being
safety.
harmed physically in their own home.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so listen, I mean, right now, I mean, the first thing we can do is we can stand up and fight against ICE, and be outspoken and make sure that we do not believe that our local law enforcement agencies, and I've been doing this at the local level, are partnering with an overreach where we have people who are not following due process, who are masked up, and who are essentially targeting Black and brown communities. We have to speak out and show solidarity with those communities to say that this isn't right, and we need to be on the ground with them doing that. Secondly, we know a lot about what works in terms of trying to keep these communities safe. So that means communicating, in particular, to our undocumented communities and our communities of color. Again, not an abstract issue for me. Just 2 months ago, on the playground, I have a 13-year-old daughter that I mentioned. She was on the playground. She had a back and forth with another child, and the child during the course of this conversation said to her, "Kristen, don't worry about it. You're going to be deported." And the I don't blame the child, right, for that. Like, that's stemming from this national climate. And actually, I was more worried about the other kid than I was about my daughter, quite frankly, if you ever met my daughter. But I say that to say she told us, she came home to tell Alex and I that story, right? She shared it with us. So there was pain in that, right? And now luckily she has a support system at home and others, right, who can help her through that. But our obligation is to make sure that the kids who are in the same position, and individuals, not just kids, but the families, right, who are in the same position right now, who don't feel that they can safely report something, right, to the police because of a threat of retribution from law enforcement itself. That's why I led the fight at the county level. I'm a supporter of the Immigration Trust Act. I advocated for the governor to sign that bill. I've advocated for the legislature to pass it, our state legislature. I led the fight at the county level. We're the only county that has passed a support resolution taking a stand as a government body. Like, that are the type of things that we can do to make sure that people are safer, to advocate for policies that allow not just immigrant communities, but all of us, right, to feel that we can report what we see without fear of retribution. That's an important thing. The other part of this answer, I would say, is like investments on things that we know are that work within law enforcement. We know that more training around behavioral services, intervention, and things of that nature make a huge difference. Community policing, like, I've been on the ground, right, pushing our local departments, pushing our sheriff's department to participate in community policing, and all those things, I believe, lead to better public safety outcomes. And last but not least, I think we have to be supportive of law enforcement too. They need us to, like, they're going through a lot too. Like, they need us to show up. They need to know that they have allies that understand the challenges that they have within their positions, oftentimes underpaid, understaffed, undertrained, with huge responsibility within our communities. Like, we have to respect that. And we have to talk about that. And we can't be afraid to do both at the same time. We can't be afraid to say, yes, we support law enforcement. We support the idea of what they mean in our communities, but we also would like to see things over here so they can effectively do the job better in keeping all of us safe.
How do we counter attempts to use fear about safety to justify harm against immigrants, trans people, people of color, and other vulnerable groups?
Yeah, I think I touched on it in the last answer. I mean, we have to we can do things like try to get the Immigrant Trust Act passed. We can do things also at the federal level. Maybe if we have a majority, we can talk about ideas around having similar type legislation. We have to show up, right? I mean, part of building, and this again, I think would be those communities that exist within the New Jersey 11th congressional district where they're concentrated. Again, they're not going to be meeting me for the first time. So when we're talking about Bloomfield, Belleville, Dover, parts of Little Falls, Totowa, and Woodland Park, like these are places that it's important to know where those communities live, who is recognized and leaders in those communities, and making sure that you're meeting those people where they are. So you need to be there. You need to be firmly on the ground. And at the same time, I think there's a range of things, both at the state and federal level, that we could be doing to make sure that we're doing our best to protect those communities. And again, I can't stress it enough. Like my wife immigrated to this country when she was 14. She did not speak English. Family separation for her was real. Her mom came first, 2 to 3 years to get settled, then brought her over from Colombia. Alexson is the first Colombian American to serve in the New Jersey legislature, which we're very proud of, and I think is a very big deal. So these are the issues that you're talking about. Like they're not abstract to us. Like they're every day. They're every day.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back over to Allison for the issue-specific questions.
Could you tell us about times where you have supported immigrants even when doing so was risky?
I appreciate that, Allison. I think I touched on it. You know, I was not met with a lot of support when I publicly opposed the County of Essex contract with ICE. The majority of our state, and again, we can have a difference of opinion. I don't say that to in any way, condemn people who supported the contract. It was just an example for me of an area and a policy that didn't work, that had an element of moral clarity that needed to be defined no matter what. There was not enough money in the world for me that would ever say that we as a government entity should be taking that type of money to perform that type of service. And I introduced like legislation not only to try to get us out of that contract, but I also introduced the resolution and ordinance that created the first independent governing entity that would have oversight over our detention center. Because in addition to the contract itself, there were quite a few complaints from the community about how these detainees were being treated within the facility itself, whether it was delivery of healthcare, access to their families, and things of that nature. So I worked with the ACLU. I worked with other organizations, including Soma Action, to advocate and create through resolution and ordinance an independent review board of what we were doing in that space at the county. So and I've also been again there. Like I've been to Delaney Hall. I have visited Delaney Hall. Thankfully, the state of New Jersey and the federal government eventually followed the lead of the County of Essex. Those contracts are now illegal because of state and federal law, and I'm very happy to see that. But those are examples, not only my personal experience with my family, but also like what I've done when I've had the opportunity to do it. So I think that's and I'm proud of that actually. I shifted, not just me, through leadership, through collaboration, we shifted county policy that I think made a huge difference in the lives of individuals that I was entrusted to represent.
And you did touch on this previously, but have you advocated for the Immigrant Trust Act at the state level?
And not only did I advocate for it, you're talking to the person that got the resolution through the county commissioner board. And I think there may be only one. We might still be only one. Maybe there's two. I don't think there's another county that has put an official statement on the record to say that that act should be passed. And that resolution and support statement is not a small thing, right? Because that represents what your local elected officials are telling both our state and governor to do. It's an issue of disagreement. I will tell you, it's even an issue of disagreement that I have. I'm an independent thinker. I know oftentimes, like if folks don't know me or they might just look at a perception, they might have this idea that I'm it's an overused term. I'm an establishment person or whatever else kind of label they want to throw at me. But the idea is that even our governor, who I helped get elect and who helped endorse, I completely disagreed with our incoming governor, Governor Sherrill, right, who has not taken a firm position on that issue. I disagreed on that. I thought at more so at any moment in time, the Immigration Trust Act should be supported and not just supported before advocated and passed. So so these are like, that's a bill that is affecting people that are our friends and our neighbors. These are members of our community. These are members of our community, and they need someone at a time where they have almost no one standing up for them. Like we can stand up for them as members of our community and stand up for everyone else, right? We don't have to separate it that way. And I believe the Immigration Trust Act is a good way to do that. And I have even said it to members of my own party when I don't think they're doing enough or they haven't taken a position to support it.
Could you tell us about times where you have supported trans and other LGBTQIA plus people, even when doing so was risky?
So again, I mean, part of the ways that you can do that through the role that I've had locally. I'm going to talk about what I've done locally, and then the candidates that I've had the opportunity to either work for officially or the campaigns that I've worked on. Locally, again, led the fight to help create the first ever Office of LGBTQIA Affairs in the county of Essex. We have a full office dedicated to that. And was part of that process, working collaboratively with our county executive and other members of the board to get that done. So I think that's a very specific thing that we've done to try to make a statement and take a role. We have passed resolutions supporting our transgender and non-binary residents. Right now, as we know, that transgender issue is being used as a political football, so to speak. And being, in my opinion, manipulated on lots of different sides. And more so than ever, I think it's important for people that are in this seat and people that have the opportunity to speak out to say we don't accept that. And we will stand with our transgender community. And by the way, we can also do both of those things and say that we also support common sense solutions. The idea that we don't have common sense solutions, I reject. This kind of idea that supporting those communities doesn't mean we support mainstream, that we don't support mainstream thought. This is mainstream thought. Protection of supporting those communities is important. Standing them is important. I formally recognized March 31st as a Transgender Day of Visibility in Essex County, hoping that I was sending a clear message that every resident deserves dignity and protection. I've worked with community leaders, Amani Hayes. I'm trying to think of a few others. The AIDS Foundation, the North Jersey Community Research Group. So these are all organizations that I've worked with and I think can speak to my track record on these issues. And I've also been proud to work, I think, for candidates and in offices that really tried to create and support policies that were inclusive and not only inclusive, but we're not afraid, right, to speak up on these issues.
Could you give examples of when you have prioritized climate action, even though there were competing priorities?
So climate action, I think one of the things that I'm most proud of during my time in service is supporting and leading the charge to create what is now called the Greenaway, but which is called the Essex Hudson Greenaway now. It is the first state park created in New Jersey in a generation. For those who may be watching this who don't know what it is a 9-mile rail line, old freight rail line, defunct rail line that starts in Montclair, goes through Bloomfield, Glen Ridge, and Belleville and into Newark and connects all the way over into Jersey City. It was brought to me as an idea when I first was elected to the Essex County Board of Commissioners by a group of activists, community leaders, and elected officials. It was then called the Iron and Ice Trail, who said, this could be New Jersey's version of the High Line. And every single person who ever they brought this to told them it was impossible, it could never happen, and it wouldn't be able to get done. Well, what we did is we went to work. And over a decade, and it took us over a decade, not saying all things should take this long, by the way. I was lucky to be able to still be around to advocate for it in various capacities. But over a decade, we built the momentum to understand, and this is where I was able to put my skill set to use. And this is why I think I would be able to do a job as a member of Congress very well. We were able to understand, what did we need from the state? What did we need from the federal government? What did we need from these various communities to educate and build support for the project? What were the environmental impacts, the economic development impacts? And when we're talking about the issue of climate change, transportation alternatives are a big part of how we're going to respond to the issue of climate change in this country. And this particular project, I'm proud to say, which is no longer if, it's just a question of when. We broke ground on the first mile during the summer. This project is now funded and is now going to happen. It is going to be New Jersey's version of the High Line, and it's going to provide a tremendous transportation alternative for people who want to commute among those communities, among that trail. You'll be able to ride your bike from Jersey City to Montclair, or Glen Ridge and Newark to Jersey City, or Jersey City and back. You'll even be able to commute into Lower Manhattan through the use of this trail. And it's an example of a project that had a potential great, or will have a great potential public health benefit. It helps address the issue directly of segregation that exists, and even within this own congressional district, because it connects communities that are normally not connected. And then ultimately it leads to potentially better policy outcomes, like people maybe using more walking, bicycling, running, so to speak, to get where they need to go. So that's just a very specific example of what I've done on the issue of climate, on climate change. I've also been a huge proponent of the Climate Superfund Act. That act right now is a state, again, just because you have this federal role doesn't mean these issues will all be addressed federally. They can be addressed locally and at the state level too. And you can see that, again, I've been on the record, one of the first, made sure that Essex County was the first county to push through a resolution supporting the Climate Superfund Act. The Climate Superfund Act is a great piece of legislation that will make sure those folks who have damaged our environment through the release of greenhouse gas emissions can be held accountable, so that average taxpayers are not paying for the damage that they've done to this environment. And the bill allows state entities and other entities to go after those polluters and make sure that they pay their fair share. Very difficult thing to do right now. That bill is actually making its way potentially through the lame duck session of the legislature right now. But that bill is the type of policies that we need in order to directly address the issue of climate change. I've also done things as locally as I was the leader who banned smoking and got passed a resolution and legislation that banned smoking in our county parks. I know it sounds like maybe a small thing. I was not met with a lot of support from a lot of folks who were on golf courses, smoking cigars, right, whatever, right? I wasn't too popular with the golfing crowd for doing that, but overall, that was like an initiative that was supported by statewide organizations, statewide groups that said, listen, like, we're in these public spaces and public parks. And again, it relates to like overall quality of the environment. I don't want to say it's specific to climate change, but like it's wrapped up in the type of things that I think we need to be doing in order to address that. I've also been a huge proponent of solar and wind. I've worked, again, worked for people like Mikey Sherrill, Governor Murphy, Senator Booker. Frank Lautenberg was talking about this issue in the late 80s, right? And those are the type of people that I have worked for and who are, I think, are viewed as environmental champions and environmental stewards. And I would want to continue and maintain their legacy if I had this opportunity.
How have you prioritized diversity, equity, and inclusion in your own organizations and more broadly, even while it's under attack?
So I've tried to prioritize it by working for and organizations that support it. First and foremost, I'm proud to say that I was the campaign manager to elect the first African-American United States senator in New Jersey's history. I'm proud to say that I was the campaign manager that elected the first African American woman statewide office holder that this state has ever seen. I'm proud to say that in my own family, yeah, I am married to the first Colombian American to ever serve in the New Jersey legislature. So those are not small things. And I hope that, and it was not lost on me, the opportunity that I had to do those things. And when we're talking about issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. Secondly, like we have to get away from the idea that DEI is a bad thing. I mean, it's right. We are in a total wrong space where we know what people are doing, where they are using the word, they are trying to make the word diversity, equity, and inclusion a bad word with a negative connotation. So we have to take a series of steps, whether it's through the leadership of our own organizations, to make sure that we know that we embrace that. And I have done that. You can look on the composition of my own staffs when I've had the opportunity to hire staff. Those staffs represent the communities again that we were seeking to serve. You can see it through the kind of policies that I have advocated for in my public service career, and hopefully you can see it in my personal life and just how and just what it means to me. Like I come from a diverse community, and I can tell you that you cannot put a price tag on the type of education that I received socially by being able to grow up in a place like Montclair. And it wasn't until that I kind of moved around to a lot of other places that I realized that there's a big difference in the experience that I had growing up than someone who grew up in a more monolithic community. I don't mean one is right or wrong, by the way. I'm not criticizing someone who's in a monolithic community. What I'm trying to say ultimately is that I believe diversity is still a strength. It is a strength of our region. It is a strength of the town that I was born and raised and shaped how I approach a lot of issues in my own public service career. And I would want to do things and can continue to do things to make sure that when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we think it's important, we think it's valued, and we're going to support it.
What do you support doing to make healthcare accessible and affordable for everyone, including vaccines, contraception, abortion care, and gender-affirming care?
So, on reproductive health, right? We have to be fighters. 100%, support a woman's right to choose. Support the funding of Planned Parenthood and delivering reproductive health. Continue to support and fight for the funding of our federally qualified health centers, where so much of the care occurs that you just described. Making sure that we restore the ACA provisions that the Trump administration weakened or removed. Premiums are rising, right? As a result of that, we have to deal with that issue. And ultimately, I'm sorry, vaccines, right? So direct experience with the delivery of vaccines, because I think the County of Essex, I was the Commissioner Board President during the pandemic. And I think it is, we can say without question, that the County of Essex, more so than any other county in this state, met the public health challenge in the way that we organized our access and delivery of the vaccines that were needed, that saved hundreds of thousands of lives. So there's the practical on the ground implementation of that, which I have experience and help execute on. And then there's also what you would need in this role to, whatever's coming out of Robert Kennedy at this point, right? To just have, the general common sense pushback to what we're hearing out of Washington. So, and that's probably also tied up in fighting back against disinformation. Like I talked about a lot, guardrails around these companies that control what we're seeing and hearing. There's a tremendous amount of disinformation out there, right? Around issues of public health. That again, right back to like, how are we going to regulate these companies that have this responsibility to disseminate information in the public health space. So I would be an advocate to make sure that we were not disseminating disinformation, that we're supporting science, that we're listening to doctors and public health experts. And also, we should learn one thing, and I learned this at the county level in terms of a public health response, because I think it's tied up in your question, which is that we have not invested enough in public health officers. We have a lot of research, right? We have a lot invested in research. We have a lot invested in um, doctors, so to speak, and where that science lives. But we have a real need, and I'm proud to be a part of the county's partnership with Montclair State University to collaborate with our county hospital and their public health program at the university to train more people in that space. Because one of the reasons that we as a county of Essex were able to respond so adequately to the pandemic is that we had a great public health leader who led our department, who understood the intersection of all those things, who understood the intersection of the science, who understood the intersection of the medical facilities that existed in our district and what we needed from them, that understood how we could better get out to the communities in order to make sure that we were getting the help where it needed to go. Like that's a big part of the question that you just asked that we got to spend some time on, invest more heavily in, and be a part of that process.
We have come to the last question, which is there anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't covered?
That's a great question. So I don't think there's anything that we haven't covered. I would just say also just to that past section, gender care. I didn't mention that. There's probably a bunch of things that after we're done that I'm going to say, oh man, I forgot to mention this. But gender affirming care is a big issue as well that we got to continue to support, and we cannot let our public health institutions and our hospitals be extorted by the federal government in that way. Like that cannot happen. We cannot buckle, and I would be speaking out against that if I had the opportunity in terms of what I see some of our health institutions doing when they're threatened by the federal government if they're going to provide that type of care. So gender affirming care needs to be provided for and supported. Let me just say one other thing. I didn't have a chance to talk about it, but the SOMA Action Voting Rights Committee. The reason that in Essex County that we vote on paper ballots was because leaders in SOMA Action came to me and said, we have an issue with voting security and around 2020, that we need to make sure that we restore and maintain the integrity of our election process. And working with the leadership of SOMA, we fought and convinced the County of Essex to go to paper ballots, which is the safest way for us to execute our elections. And it's a great example of the type of work that we can do together at a time when we have election deniers, at a time when we have people in the Congress right now who say January 6th didn't happen. We need more. It's crazy, I know, but we need more. We need more work like that. Last but not certainly least, we just went through a process around this special election about party support, the use of a slogan. There was SOMA Action was very involved in that, and I think it's important to say that I support that type of dialogue and activity that gets us to more fair and inclusive processes. I'm so excited that we have this many candidates who are running in this race. But I will say to everyone who watches this and to all of my colleagues who are running, we have to also be careful about how we characterize people when they disagree with us if we don't like the outcome. We need to be together, not divided. And when we go through processes where we may have disagreement about even the process itself or what should happen in that process, we have to be careful not to characterize people that may disagree with us in a way that discredits or demeans their own opinion just because they disagree with us. And we have a challenge with that right now, within our party that we have to solve. We cannot do that. We cannot pick and choose, in my opinion, who is righteous, so to speak, and who isn't. We need to be together. We need unity, and we need to support one another ultimately, or we will not get out of this process. So I say that to say that hopefully, what will come out of a 10-person field, a short primary, is a stronger, unified movement that will help solve the issues and challenges that we just had the opportunity to talk about for over an hour. So I'm grateful for this in-depth opportunity. I'm grateful for you humoring me and letting me give you these very long answers and totally not following my 2 to 3 minute instruction. But I'm deeply, deeply grateful. And it's one of the things that I most enjoy about the campaign process and about the ability to serve. So thank you, each and every one of you.
And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your vision for New Jersey's 11th congressional district. On behalf of all of us at Soma Action, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank
And
you.
I'm actually going to pop one follow-up question
Sure.
that you have not worn out our patience.
Okay. I'm game.
So you spoke about this at the very beginning of the interview, but I was just wondering, could you speak a little more specifically to what has changed in terms of how staffers and volunteers in campaigns and congressional offices can expect to be treated?
Yeah, I mean, when I first worked on multiple campaigns, there was no HR officer. There was no guidebook on what the expectations were in terms of workplace environment. Campaigns were very much startup companies, small amount of employees, scaling up very quickly in a short amount of time to sometimes hundreds, maybe even sometimes thousands of employees, without really a lot of guidance on what type of processes should be in place to have. There were not set hours when I first worked on campaigns. I can tell you that first campaign I worked on, I was as a college graduate. I was paid $750 a month, well beyond minimum wage as a college graduate. It was a great opportunity. I worked 15 to 16 hours a day. We did not have time off. Time off was not even considered. There was no health care afforded us. And by the way, I love doing it, so I don't want you to get the wrong idea. It was a mission-driven work with an objective, but it had not yet merged with the idea that these are also work environments that should be treated like we would treat other work environments. That there should be, basic baseline rules and regulations, so to speak, for the employees themselves. Over time, that shifted and changed. Campaigns started to rely on law firms to give advice and counsel on what HR should look like. In the 2017 campaign, and I will address this directly, I had the premier Democratic law firm responsible for all of the HR practices of the Murphy campaign, meaning that, and again, this is not to cast blame or to say that there's no responsibility. At the end of the day, I was the campaign manager, but I am confident when I tell you that we had every single best practice and advice and expert in that space at that time telling us how we should make sure the campaign should be set up from an HR perspective. And in some ways, it still failed. And in some ways, it still failed, which meant that there needed to be more evolution and change from what happened at that time.
And what has that evolution been?
The evolution has been the hiring now of HR specialists for campaigns. The evolution has been allowing campaign workers to even explore the idea of unionizing, which we saw more recently. The evolution has been the classification of campaign employees. The evolution has been what happens between the time a campaign is over and a government position occurs. Like one of the biggest facts that is oftentimes misinterpreted from what happened during the 2017 campaign is that some of the more egregious things had nothing to do with the campaign. They were the response of a transition committee. They were a response of an administration. They were not the response of a campaign. So I say that to mean that there are very complicated issues around how campaign HR processes should be set up that, in my opinion, have only got better over time. But those are just three examples of things that didn't exist when I first started. There was no HR officer. There was no employee handbook. There was no idea that none of that was and people were oftentimes fired on campaigns without cause. There was no recourse for that. Like if I decided, like when I first started in politics, if I decided like on Sunday night, like if I tried to leave the office at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night, I would have just been told, don't come back on Monday. Like that, and that's just the way it was. So, and I'm not saying, again, good or bad. Like there was a lot of, like we learned, like you learned a lot about yourself during those processes too. But ultimately, and I appreciate the question. Ultimately, legal, HR professionals, structure, what needs to be done, whether it be administratively or legislatively, all lead to those better outcomes. And we've seen a lot of improvements, in those areas. Like I would say most campaigns now have dedicated HR specialists. They have dedicated, again, law firms that are in the area of employment law, right? That's another thing, right? Like a lot of times when I was running campaigns, you're taking count. And again, this is not to, this is not any way to say that we didn't get good counsel or advice, but there are the law firms that campaigns would normally hire to do this type of work were very much in the space of finance regulation, compliance, right? They weren't HR and employment firms per se. And I think that contributed sometimes to, the just the kind of the nature of the beast, so to speak, and how those things worked. So what I'm most proud to say is that if any time there was a time where I had an opportunity to be in one organization and go to the next, and there was something that we learned, like I said, or thought we should do better, and that's why when I had the 17 opportunity, like I was the first campaign, probably in the first statewide campaign that I ever knew of that had all of those things in place. Like whatever was the most up to date and current best HR practice, the 2017 campaign had it. So and that's a fact.
Okay, thank you. And on behalf of Soma Action, we really appreciate you joining us and look forward to the campaign.
Great. I look forward to seeing everybody on the trail soon. And I should finally say, either way, no matter what happens in this primary, I look forward to being able to continue to work with you on the many issues that you have made a difference in the community. So I really look forward to that. So thank you.
Thank you.